Hi, I'm Maris. At my sister's wedding, she had me and my son clean tables, like we were part of the staff. I smiled through it, even when they laughed, even when they called me the cousin from out of state, as if I'd never been part of this family. But what hurt more wasn't the chores. It was watching my 13-year-old son realize, maybe for the first time, that even kindness can be weaponized. Then, right when I thought I'd swallowed my last bit of pride, he stood up, took the mic, and everything changed. What did he say that made the whole room go silent? There was a time when a simple envelope arriving in the mail didn't stop me cold. That afternoon, I stood over the kitchen counter, sorting through grocery ads and medical bills, when I noticed the gold-trimmed envelope with the calligraphy lettering, "No return address." But the minute I saw Branwen, my stomach tensed. I knew it was Callista's. The paper was too expensive, the handwriting too curated for it to be from anyone else. Still, I opened it carefully. Inside was an ivory card with embossed lettering, "The Branwen McAllister Wedding." At the top, it read, "You are cordially invited to the celebration of the union of Callista Branwen and Jeffrey McAllister." Underneath, "To the family of Verlene Branwen. No Mary's, no Elian, no name at all." I flipped it over, twice. Searched for an RSVP card with our names. Nothing. It was the first time in 7 years I'd received anything from her that wasn't through our mother. And it still felt like an invitation to someone else. I stood there longer than I should have, that familiar ache rising in my throat. It's funny how a lack of ink can say more than a paragraph ever could. Elian came through the door moments later, tossing his backpack on the couch like he always did. "Mom, you got mail?" I quickly slid the card under a stack of papers. "Just a wedding thing." "Whose?" he asked, already moving toward the fridge. "Your Aunt Callista's." I watched his face. He paused, then brightened just a bit. "We're going?" I hesitated. "Do you want to?" He closed the fridge door with his shoulder, holding a can of soda. "I mean, I haven't seen Grandma in a while. Or anyone." And just like that, my decision wasn't mine anymore. 2 weeks later, we packed a weekend bag, and I drove us the 4 hours from Greenville to Charleston. Elian dozed off halfway through the trip. I had too much circling in my head to sleep. Boone Hall Plantation, that was the location. Classic, southern, photogenic. The kind of place that always felt like it belonged to someone else. By the time we pulled into the gravel lot, the sun was sliding behind the oaks, casting long, symmetrical shadows. The plantation house loomed like something out of a family history book we were never invited to write in. At the welcome table, a girl in a sleek black dress held a clipboard. She looked up with a professional smile. "Name?" "Maris Godwin, and my son, Elian." Her smile faltered for just a second. "Oh, one moment." She walked off, weaving through people in pastel dresses and champagne-colored suits. My stomach twisted. Elian tugged at his sleeve, trying to straighten the collar I'd ironed that morning. "Do we not have seats?" he whispered. The girl returned with a tighter smile and led us toward the guest chart. She pointed to a name card halfway down the display. Our names were there, technically. Under the heading, Janitorial Volunteer, Godwin, M. and Guest. My breath hitched. I blinked to make sure I read that right. Elian leaned closer, his jaw tightening. "Oh, sorry," the planner said quickly. "That must be a print mix-up. We've had a few odd labels. I'm sure it wasn't intentional." But I scanned the rest of the chart. Not a single other label was wrong. The girl guided us to our table, at the far edge of the garden, near the sound booth. As we sat, Elian stayed quiet. He didn't ask questions, didn't complain, just folded his napkin slowly and placed it in his lap like he was trying not to exist. I looked around at the rest of the tables, decorated with personalized menus and gold-edged cards. Ours had plastic place settings and a folded paper program that listed the evening's timeline, but not our names. "We're only here for one night," I whispered to myself. "Don't make it about you." But the sting didn't fade. It sat there, beneath my ribs, pulsing with every laugh I didn't feel welcome to join. And then I saw where they placed my son. The reception hall was breathtaking. Vaulted ceilings, white drapery cascading from chandeliers, and the kind of floral arrangements that only exist in magazines or the weddings of women like my sister. As we stepped in, I instinctively slowed down, scanning for our names among the rows of tables adorned with golden cards and embossed menus. I spotted my name, tucked at the back near a service entrance. And then I looked for Elian's. His name wasn't beside mine. A few steps away stood a table with a paper tent labeled Young Guests. Crayons, juice boxes, and activity sheets covered the cloth. And right in the center of it was a small card, Elian Godwin. My stomach dropped. He stood quietly beside me, his hands in his pockets, trying not to look disappointed. A little girl in pigtails was already scribbling next to his assigned seat. I flagged down a young woman with a headset. "Excuse me, there must be a mix-up. My son's 13. She smiled the way staff are trained to smile when they're delivering something impolite in a polite tone. "Oh, I see. Callista asked for him to be placed there. She said he was still in middle school. Most of our family teens are sitting with their parents or at the junior adult table. But I can check if there's room." I shook my head. "It's fine." Elian didn't say a word. He simply walked over, pulled out the too small chair, and sat. He didn't touch the crayons. He just stared at his folded napkin like it held the answers to something bigger than this moment. I knelt beside him. "You want to move to my table?" He forced a smile. "It's okay, Mom." But his eyes didn't meet mine. Back at my table, I tried to focus on anything else. Napkin folds, water condensation on my glass, anything but the sight of my son sitting among kids who still needed help cutting their food. It was subtle. It was calculated. An usher passed by with a tray of wristbands. "These are for guest access," he explained. "Different bands for different sections." He handed me a silver one. I noticed other family members slipping on gold bands. Some had their names engraved. Mine was plain. I approached one of the attendants near the ballroom. "Excuse me, my son is sitting just over there, and I wanted to walk him toward the photo room. It's in the family wing?" He looked at my wrist. "Silver bands are for reception access only. Family wing is gold." No apology, no softness, just protocol. I bit the inside of my cheek and smiled. "Of course." Back at the reception corner, I guided Elian away from the kids' table. "Want to stretch your legs?" He nodded. We walked to the outer edge of the garden, where no one seemed to be paying attention. The laughter from the main hall drifted through the air, punctuated by camera flashes and the clinking of glasses. On a small side table sat gift bags. I picked up the one labeled Maris. It was light. I opened it. Empty, except for a paper coupon for a local spa. The bag next to it, marked for a cousin, bulged with monogrammed items, embroidered napkins, a keychain, a handwritten note. It wasn't an oversight. It was consistent. Planned. Elian reached into his own bag, found a coloring book, and handed it to a younger kid nearby. He didn't look angry, just tired. I took a deep breath, fighting the heat rising in my throat. "Don't react. You promised you'd be gracious." I thought about my father. He would have said something, probably too much. But he wasn't here, hadn't been for years. And this wasn't his battle to fight. It was mine, quiet, careful, calculated. As I tucked the empty gift bag under the table, I glanced up and froze. Callista was making her entrance. She stood at the top of the grand staircase, dressed like the cover of a bridal magazine, soaking in every ounce of attention. People turned, phones lifted, laughter rose again, this time louder, richer, more celebratory. No one noticed the woman in the corner or the boy still sitting at the children's table. No one ever does. By the time the sun dipped below the treetops, casting long shadows across the lawn, a soft chime rang through the reception hall, calling guests back to their seats. The coordinator announced it was time for the Life Journey slideshow, Callista's curated legacy, projected onto a 15-foot screen for all to admire. I stayed seated, though part of me wanted to slip outside and find a quiet patch of grass. Elian sat beside me, quietly sipping from his water glass. He glanced over as the lights dimmed, then rested his arm lightly against mine. I kept my hand on his shoulder. The screen lit up with images of Callista as a baby in a frilly bonnet, then a toddler blowing out birthday candles. The room filled with warm chuckles and murmurs of nostalgia. The sound of glasses clinking, the rustle of taffeta skirts. People were leaning in, soaking up the fairy tale. And then the years began to tick by. Family vacations, school awards, Christmas mornings. I saw them all, except I wasn't in any of them. Not really. In some, I remembered exactly where I'd stood when the photo was taken. I remembered holding the camera. I remembered the smell of sunscreen, the sound of wrapping paper tearing, the way Callista had squealed when she unwrapped that scooter at 11 years old. But in every photo where I should have been, I wasn't. Either the image was cropped, or someone's elbow conveniently blocked my face. Once, a graphic overlay with "Happy Holidays" in sparkly letters landed right where I'd been sitting on the couch. Elian leaned forward, his brows subtly drawn. He didn't say a word, but I knew he saw it too. Then came prom. There she was, glowing, flawless, posed on our front porch in a pale blue gown. The photo was beautifully lit. I'd taken that one. I remembered pinning her hair back just right. I'd driven her to the fitting, stayed up the night before steaming the fabric. I'd held her earrings in my palm while she picked out her shoes. And yet, I wasn't in the frame, not even a reflection in the glass door behind her. The applause was generous. Her friends cheered. Her groom leaned in and kissed her temple. A slideshow designed to honor her life had rewritten mine out of it. I quietly stood and slipped out of the hall before the cake-cutting segment. Outside, the sky was bruising with early evening clouds. String lights began to flicker on as I wandered toward a side area near the garden entrance, where a glass case had been set up. "Harlan's Keepsakes," the sign read. It was a tribute to our father. His bronze star was pinned in the center. His cufflinks were arranged in a neat row. There were handwritten notes from guests and old photos from his army days. My eyes scanned the bottom shelf, where the letters were. Years ago, I'd written him a letter after we'd had a fight. I was 16. I'd poured myself into those pages. My hopes, my guilt, my confusion about everything going on in our house. He never spoke of it again, but I'd seen it in his desk drawer once, folded and worn at the edges. It wasn't there. A middle-aged woman in a navy pantsuit was arranging the display. I cleared my throat. "Hi, sorry. Was there a letter here? From a daughter? I think it had a green ribbon." She looked up, unsure. "You must be Maris." That told me enough. She hesitated, then said, "Callista made final edits. She said that letter didn't really fit the tone." I stood there a moment, hands still at my sides. The evening breeze caught the hem of my dress. Something inside me tried to well up, but I pressed it down before it could rise. I thanked the woman and walked back toward the reception hall. Elian was waiting outside, holding 2 drinks. "I thought you'd want ginger ale." I took it from him. Our fingers touched briefly. His eyes scanned mine, looking for some kind of signal. I forced a small smile. "Thanks." We sat on the low brick wall near the walkway, watching the lanterns sway. Guests were laughing inside, unaware or pretending not to know. "When someone erases you this thoroughly," I said quietly, more to myself than to him, "you stop asking to be seen. You start documenting instead." He didn't ask what I meant. He just handed me a napkin from his pocket, the kind with the wedding date and Callista's name in gold cursive. I folded it in half, placed it in my bag like a record. I unlocked my phone and opened the voice memo app. Not to say anything, just to start listening. The music shifted, soft piano turning cinematic, like we were suddenly watching a trailer for a movie no one invited me to star in. Chairs creaked as guests twisted in their seats. Camera flashes fired one after another. Then she appeared. Callista stood at the top of the staircase like she'd been sculpted for that moment. Her veil fell in soft folds down her back, and her dress, lace, ivory, timeless, was one I recognized immediately. Not just any gown. It was our mother's wedding dress, the one she kept preserved in a cedar chest, wrapped in tissue and memories. The one she once said would be mine. Callista descended the stairs slowly, each step measured, as though she were stepping into history. Applause rolled through the hall. It was thunder, deafening. I didn't move. I wasn't jealous. That would have been too small for what I felt. It was something closer to betrayal, cloaked in satin and stitched in silence. Something no one else seemed to notice, or chose not to. I felt a tap on my arm. My mother stood beside me, hands clasped like she was attending mass. "Doesn't she look beautiful?" she whispered. "She earned that dress." I didn't respond. I bit down on the inside of my cheek so hard it ached. I didn't trust my mouth to stay quiet if I opened it. A memory surfaced without permission. Me, 17, standing barefoot in the living room while Mom lifted the lid of that cedar chest and unfolded the gown with care. "One day," she'd said, smoothing the lace over her forearm, "this'll be yours, but only if you take care of it like I did." I never asked for it again. After I left, I figured it went back to the attic, forgotten or given away. But now, seeing it hugging Callista's figure, customized and altered, made it clear. It hadn't been forgotten. It had been reassigned. After the speeches and second round of toasts, I stepped outside. I didn't announce my exit. I just needed to breathe. The garden path was empty, lit by low lanterns and dusky light. I followed the walkway until I reached the far hedge, where roses bloomed without trying. I stood there for a while, unsure what I was doing, whether I was calming down or letting the quiet remind me who I used to be. I didn't hear her approach until she spoke. "You always had a way of disappearing when things got difficult," my mother said. Her voice wasn't harsh. It was polite. That made it worse. "I just needed a moment." She stepped closer. "Maris, don't start something tonight. This is Callista's day. Let it be hers." I turned to face her. "Did you know? About the dress? About the photos? About all of it?" She looked away like she'd been asked to calculate a tip. "Some things are better left behind. You need to stop holding on to the past. Be the bigger person." There it was. Again. That phrase. Be the bigger person. The command women get when they're expected to absorb more than they should. When silence is equated to virtue. I wondered how many times she had said that to herself about me. "I was the one who helped her pick that dress," I said. "The first time she tried it on, she cried because the sleeves were itchy. You weren't there. I was." "That doesn't matter now," she replied, soft but firm. "Don't make people uncomfortable tonight. This family needs peace." "This family needs honesty," I said, but it didn't land. Her expression had already shut the door. She walked away without another word. I stood alone by the roses. My hands trembled, not from rage, but from holding back everything that wanted to erupt. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I opened the voice memo, the one I'd started earlier. Play. I didn't listen for long, just enough to hear her voice. My sister's, not my mother's. The sound of them laughing about how Maris won't do anything anyway. They weren't wrong. I hadn't done anything, not yet. "Mom?" I turned. Elian was holding 2 dessert cups, 1 chocolate, 1 lemon. He held them out without comment, like it was the most natural thing in the world to find me hiding near the rose bushes. "Thanks," I said. We sat on the bench together, quiet except for the occasional wind stirring the leaves. "That dress wasn't just lace," I told him. "It was acknowledgement." He didn't pretend to understand fully. He just looked down at his shoes for a second, then back at me. "You're still not ready, are you?" he asked softly. I nodded, but my eyes were already burning. The transition from sunset cocktails to the gift acknowledgments happened seamlessly. Too seamlessly. One moment, people were still sipping champagne and nibbling on shrimp skewers. The next, they were being directed back to their seats by the MC's chirpy voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, our bride would now like to share a few words of gratitude for the people who made this day so special." I returned to my table with Elian close behind. I hadn't eaten much, but I held a half-empty flute of sparkling water, just to keep my hands busy. Callista stood on the platform beneath the floral arch, aglow in candlelight and the center of every camera. She cleared her throat gently, then began listing names. She thanked old teachers, sorority sisters, former bosses. She smiled at distant cousins and shared a personal memory about a friend who flew in from Oregon. The crowd lapped it up like gospel. Then she held up a small velvet box. "This," she said, lifting the necklace gently from within, "was my mother's, and I'm so grateful to Aunt Vera for returning this precious family heirloom to me. It means more than I can put into words." Applause broke out. I sat still. I knew that necklace. I'd found it weeks ago while clearing out the cedar chest in our basement. Yes, our basement. The one she never once helped sort through after Mom's fall. I'd wrapped it carefully, tucked a handwritten card beside it. The note read, "May this remind you who we come from, and that not all things forgotten are lost." I'd sent it through our mother, trusting her to deliver it privately before the ceremony. There had been no reply, no text, no acknowledgement. Until now. Only it wasn't my name being honored. It was Vera's, our great aunt, who hadn't seen Callista since she was 12. I stared straight ahead, heart slowing like it knew something my body was still catching up to. Callista beamed as she clasped the necklace around her neck, oblivious to the quiet disfigurement she'd just created in front of everyone. The applause faded. Dessert was served. Conversations picked back up. But the air around me stayed still, like waiting for something to crack. Later, on my way back from the restroom, I turned the corner near the coat room and nearly bumped into Aunt Maura. "Oh, Maris," she said, startled. Her lipstick had smudged slightly, and she clutched her shawl as if for protection. "Did you see the gift segment?" I asked calmly. She nodded, but her eyes darted away. "I did. I sent that necklace. And the card. I wrote that note myself." Maura swallowed hard, the way people do when they're deciding how much truth they're willing to live with. "I know you did," she finally said. "I saw it. Verlene. She took out the note. Said it was too sentimental. Told Callista to credit Vera instead. Said it would play better in front of the crowd." My mouth didn't move. My whole face stayed still. "Why didn't you say anything?" She looked down at the floor tiles, then back at me with a softness that somehow made everything worse. "I'm on the deed for the main property," she whispered. "Your mother made that very clear." So that was the exchange rate. Silence for land. Complicity for comfort. I didn't speak. I didn't nod. I just walked away. The lounge area behind the main dining tent was dim, mostly empty. A few groomsmen were checking their phones. I found Callista by the mirror, touching up her lipstick with the kind of confidence that made me wonder if she even remembered we shared a childhood. She caught my reflection and offered a look somewhere between bored and amused. "Need something?" I just came to say one thing," I replied, tone level, eyes calm. "If you keep rewriting history, don't be shocked when the truth decides to speak for itself." She let out a short breath that was more scoff than laugh. "It's not that deep, Maris. Everyone's just trying to get through the day." I nodded once. "Some of us have been doing that for years." I left her there, staring at herself. Outside, the wind had picked up. I walked slowly, letting the sounds of the reception muffle behind me. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app again, and this time I hit record. Dinner service had started, and the noise inside the reception hall had softened to the usual clatter of silverware and polite laughter. From where we sat, in the far corner again, I watched servers glide between tables with practiced grace, placing fillets and garnished asparagus in front of guests who'd never had to earn respect in rooms like this. Elian and I were almost done with our plates, eating in silence, when a young planner approached us. Her hair was slicked into a tight bun, headset snug over one ear. She bent slightly, voice low. "Hi, Ms. Godwin. I'm sorry to bother you. Callista mentioned you used to do event work. She wondered if you might help with a small spill near the back corner. Just a quick towel-over situation." It was dressed like a favor, polite and optional, but her eyes didn't match the words. They were trained, cautious, like she already expected me to nod. I stood. "Of course." Elian looked up from his plate. I offered a smile like it was nothing, but my hands curled at my sides as I followed her toward the linen closet. She handed me a towel and motioned discreetly toward a table leg where a half glass of wine had dribbled. As I bent to wipe the stain, I felt it. Eyes. A woman at the next table nudged her husband and tilted her chin in my direction. Another glanced over, then away, then back again. Their faces didn't hold disgust. That would have been too honest. No, this was polite curiosity laced with something smug. When I returned to my table, I hadn't sat down 10 seconds before another planner came over. Different face, same tone. "Hi again, sorry. One of the dessert tables near the fountain shifted during setup. Would you mind helping realign the platters? Just straighten a few things?" Elian's fork froze midair. "I'll take care of it," I said, rising again. This time, it wasn't subtle. A man in a blue suit with thinning hair called out, "Thanks, sweetheart. You've got a good eye for the details." I adjusted a tray of petite fours, my jaw clenched so tight I felt it in my ears. When I turned around, Elian wasn't at the table anymore. He was 10 feet away, carefully carrying a small tray of desserts. Likely trying to help, to prove something, to bridge a gap I never should have let him feel. Then he tripped. His foot caught the edge of a draped extension cord someone had lazily tossed along the floor. The tray tilted, and a dozen miniature cakes launched into the air like poorly rehearsed fireworks. One landed on a woman's shawl, another splattered against a champagne flute, cracking the glass. The room gasped. Then came the laughter. It started small, but it spread, like wildfire through dry brush. And above it all, crystal clear, came Callista's voice. "Guess he takes after his mother." That did it. I crossed the floor without thinking. Elian was kneeling, already trying to pick up pieces of broken porcelain with his bare hands. His face was flushed, his shoulders hunched. I knelt beside him, placing a hand gently over his. "It's okay, let it be." Then I stood. The room was still watching, waiting for more. I turned to Callista, who sat with her arms folded, an untouched glass of wine in front of her. "Next time you want something cleaned up," I said evenly, loud enough for the room to hear, "I suggest you start with your character." There was a pause. Not dramatic, not staged, just a small beat where the room didn't quite know how to recover. The band fumbled back into a soft instrumental. Someone coughed. Callista opened her mouth, but I was already walking back toward our table. Elian followed, eyes downcast. He didn't sit immediately, just stood beside me until I placed a hand on his back. Slowly, he lowered himself into his seat. "You didn't have to say that," he whispered. I looked at him. Yes, I did. And I'm just getting started. I reached into my purse, slid out my phone, and checked the screen. Still recording. From before dessert. Every word, every laugh, every insult. The lights in the reception hall dimmed, but not in the warm, romantic way you'd expect from a wedding magazine spread or a Hallmark movie. No, this dimming was deliberate, controlled, a subtle manipulation of mood and moment. A hush fell over the room like a velvet curtain being drawn before a play. Forks clinked lightly as they were set down. Champagne glasses tilted, glimmering in the softened light. Anticipation hummed like static, my back pressed against the rigid wooden chair, my breath shallowing without permission. I knew what was coming. Callista emerged onto the stage beneath a halo of white hydrangeas and string lights, her entrance perfectly timed. Her gown shimmered, catching the spotlight with a kind of cruel elegance. She moved with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed this exact moment, someone who knew the power of a pause, of a glance, of a curated smile. She adjusted the microphone slowly, like a seasoned speaker, then smiled. The corners of her mouth curled just enough. Too perfect, too polished. It didn't feel like a smile, it felt like a performance. "Thank you all for being here," she began, voice smooth as satin. "Tonight isn't just a celebration of love. It's a celebration of family, of those who show up, who stay, who don't disappear when things get messy." A ripple of knowing chuckles passed through the crowd. My stomach turned to stone. She continued, "Family has always been the backbone of who I am. The people who shaped me, supported me, who stood by me, even in the hardest seasons." I held my breath. One by one, she listed names. Uncle James, who mentored her through law school. Aunt Caroline, for taking over the seating chart. Cousin Rachel, who flew in from Denver. The room nodded and smiled. Applause broke out here and there. Toasts were raised. She never said my name, not even a glance in my direction. Then came the knife, wrapped in ribbon. "And to those who didn't run away when things got hard, thank you. You've taught me what loyalty looks like, what real love looks like." Laughter again. Lighter this time, the kind that cuts deeper because it hides behind civility. I felt my jaw tighten, my nails press against my palm. The words weren't direct. They didn't have to be. The omission was the message. The subtext, weaponized. Beside me, Elian turned his head. I felt his gaze before I saw it. His face said everything. Confusion, hurt, and slowly, recognition. He didn't need to ask what was happening. He was watching it unfold with his own eyes. I stared straight ahead. "You never even asked why I left. You never tried to understand. You just wrote me out, like I was a draft you didn't like." My hand slid to my purse. My fingers brushed the edge of my phone, still recording everything since the moment dinner had been served. I hadn't planned it, not really. But something in me had known. Call it intuition. Or self-preservation. The applause faded. Callista left the mic with a satisfied gleam in her eyes. Rudy, the MC, took the stage with his clipboard. He tapped the mic, grinning. "All right, folks, now it's time for some special acknowledgments. Let's give a big hand to the hearts behind this beautiful night." People clapped. Chairs scraped. Guests began standing for photos and applause. "Let's bring up our incredible support system," Rudy said, scanning the names. "Family, friends, our wedding circle of trust." A parade of names followed. Groups shifted toward the front. The spotlight turned toward the carefully selected few. "And a special thanks," Rudy added, squinting at his list, "to our cousin from out of state, Mar. Marie, thanks for joining us." Heads turned. Marie? Not Maris. Not sister. Cousin. It landed like a slap. Quick, cold, public. For a second, the world went silent in my ears. Just the dull thrum of white noise, like standing underwater. It wasn't even the most cruel moment of the night, but it was the one that said the quiet part out loud. "You are not part of this story." Elian's head jerked toward me, his jaw clenched, but it was his eyes that said it all. There was no mistaking the look now. Disbelief. Not just at what was said, but at the fact that no one stopped it. No one corrected it. No one stood for me. Until now. I stood. Quietly. I walked around the table, resting my hand lightly on the back of Elian's chair. I bent toward him, voice low. "We don't have to sit here and let them tell the story wrong." He looked up at me, the soft fire behind his eyes glowing brighter. He nodded once. "Then let's tell it ourselves." He stood, But he didn't walk toward the exit. He walked toward the stage. The room quieted again. Puzzled glances rippled through the crowd. Rudy blinked as Elian stepped forward, uninvited but unfazed. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "Before we move on, I'd like to say a few words." Callista turned, visibly startled. Elian reached into his coat pocket and held up the envelope I had handed him hours before. The one with the original wedding venue invoice. The one with my name on the contract. The one showing who had paid the deposit months ago when Callista had said she was still figuring things out. "I think it's time we corrected a few details," he said, then turned to the crowd. "You all heard a lot about loyalty tonight, about showing up. But the person who helped this wedding happen, who paid the deposit, who handled the vendor nightmares, who stayed up late emailing caterers, isn't even listed in the program." A murmur ran through the guests. He looked at me, then held out his hand. "Maris, come tell your side." I stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately. My heels clicked against the tile like punctuation marks, and this time I wasn't disappearing. Elian stepped onto the stage so calmly it took a full 10 seconds for anyone to notice he didn't belong up there. The band stopped mid-measure. The murmur of guests shifted from casual to confused. A few people chuckled, assuming it was part of some quirky wedding surprise. It wasn't. He reached for the mic with the steadiness of someone twice his age. His face was calm, but I saw the slight tremble in his hand as he wrapped his fingers around the handle. I stood frozen by our table, my breath trapped somewhere between my chest and my throat. "I know this wasn't planned," he began, his voice cracking just a little before he found his rhythm. "But I wanted to thank someone who hasn't been mentioned tonight." People leaned forward. Some blinked slowly, waiting for a punchline. "I want to thank my mom," he said, "for staying quiet for so long, for putting her head down even when it hurt. But she shouldn't have had to." My body stopped being mine for a moment. My knees threatened to give out. Elian pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it up to the mic. A grainy recording crackled to life. At first, it was hard to make out, muffled by purse fabric and crowd noise. Then it sharpened. Callista's voice, casual and sharp. "I'm not worried. She won't say anything. She never does. That's the thing about Maris. You don't even have to lie to her. She'll do the silencing herself." A male voice I didn't recognize. "You sure?" She looked like she was about to snap at the lounge. Then came Verlene, my mother's voice, clear, cold, and cutting. "Maris was always the one who needed to stay in the background. She just doesn't know how to stay quiet with grace." The room gasped. A fork clattered loudly against a plate. Someone whispered a profanity near the back. Callista's laugh followed. "She's not even family anymore. She's a placeholder. We gave her a seat. That should have been enough." The audio ended. Elian paused. He didn't hand the mic back. He held it tight, scanning the room of relatives and strangers, and people who had cheered Callista through every version of the truth she'd ever painted. "Grandma said she was proud of one daughter," Elian continued, "and it wasn't my mom. But it should have been, because she's the one who packed our things when no one helped. She's the one who paid bills while the rest of you played savior. She's the one who showed me what strength looks like." You could hear nothing but breathing and the buzz of electricity in the speakers. I didn't think, I just walked. I climbed the stage beside my son. He looked up, eyes wide for a moment, as if unsure whether he'd gone too far. I took the mic from him gently, and for once, I didn't hesitate. "Let me be very clear," I said. "You didn't just try to rewrite my story. You tried to erase it." I turned my eyes toward my mother. She didn't look angry. She looked unprepared. "Shame," I said, "is not in silence. It's in cruelty, and I've swallowed enough of both for a lifetime." Then to the room. "Let this be the last time someone's quiet is mistaken for guilt. Let this be the last time you reward someone for keeping the peace while bleeding underneath it." I didn't drop the mic. I set it on the table beside me with care. It made a soft thunk against the wood, a sound that, somehow, felt louder than Callista's entire toast. There was no applause, No music cue, just a room paralyzed by its own reflection. A woman 2 tables down stood and gathered her purse. Her husband followed. A cousin I barely recognized averted his eyes. Callista was still seated, but Jeff, her groom, was leaning over and whispering rapidly into her ear. She didn't speak. Her fingers trembled over her wine glass. Verlene sat stiffly, hands clasped like she was bracing for a storm that had already landed. The lights remained dim. The band didn't start again. I stepped down from the stage, finding Elian near the edge. He reached for my hand like it was instinct, like it had always been his compass. We didn't run. We walked out, not as guests, not as family, but as the only people who'd finally told the truth out loud. When we got back to Greenville, the first thing I did was open every window in the house. The air was stale from our weekend away, but more than that, I needed the sound of wind, real wind, not artificial applause or the clinking of champagne glasses. I unpacked slowly. No rush. I watered the spider plant in the kitchen that had somehow survived despite my negligence, folded laundry in silence, refilled Elian's cereal bin like it was any other Sunday. Only it wasn't. The silence in the house felt new, not cold like it used to, just quiet and mine. Elian sat at the piano in the next room, coaxing out a familiar melody. His fingers moved with more confidence than I'd ever seen. He didn't ask what would happen next. Neither did I. By Tuesday, the calls started. Not from the ones who mattered. They never called. But I heard through a neighbor that Callista's honeymoon was postponed. Her groom needed space, someone said. Her PR contract with a skincare brand was quietly canceled. Apparently, someone had leaked the audio. I never asked who. It wasn't me. But truth has a way of finding its own mouth. Verlene left a single voicemail. Her voice was clipped, rehearsed. "You embarrassed this family. I hope you're proud." I didn't reply. I just deleted it. For the first time, I didn't let her words find a home inside me. Later that night, while sorting through old receipts in the kitchen drawer, I found something I'd forgotten about. A draft email I'd once typed up during a therapy session years ago. It was meant for my mother. I'd never sent it. The message was long, rambling, part plea, part confession. I'd read it over so many times back then, trying to decide whether it sounded pathetic or brave. This time, I didn't overthink it. I read it out loud, quietly, then hovered over the send button and clicked delete. Closure, it turns out, doesn't always need witnesses. A week later, I sat at the back of Elian's school auditorium. He'd made the final round in a statewide debate contest. The topic, when speaking up isn't a choice, it's a responsibility. He stood at that microphone like he had at the wedding, calm, steady, present. When it was over, the audience clapped. Teachers nodded. Judges smiled. I didn't say, "I'm proud of you." I leaned close to him and whispered, "You made space for truth." He understood. 2 days later, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Aunt Maura standing there in her Sunday blouse, holding a potted orchid and a plain white envelope. "I won't stay," she said. "I just wanted to leave this." Inside the envelope was a note. "Some debts aren't financial. I hope this counts as interest." I didn't call her, but I didn't throw the card away either. I planted the orchid by the window. It bloomed quietly. And that's how things started to grow again. Not with fireworks or forgiveness, but with decisions made softly over time. The following weekend, Elian and I walked through Cleveland Park just as the sun dipped behind the pines. Our shadows stretched long across the gravel path. He tossed a pebble into the creek, then glanced at me. "You good, Mom?" "Better than I've been," I said. "Not done, but better." We kept walking. They told me silence was dignity, but I've learned something else. Dignity is knowing when to speak and when to walk away. And when you do walk away, you don't go empty. You carry the truth with you, even if no one claps when you tell it. We weren't welcomed back into their version of family, but we've started building our own, brick by honest brick. Sometimes the people who raised you teach you more about survival than about love. And sometimes the greatest act of strength isn't shouting to be heard, it's choosing to speak when silence has cost you everything. What I've learned is this: no one has the right to write you out of your own story. And if they try, it's not weakness to walk away, it's wisdom. So let me ask you, have you ever been made to feel invisible in your own family? Did someone ever try to tell your story without asking who you really are? If this story touched something deep inside you, leave a comment with the number 1 or share where you're watching from. If it didn't sit right with you, I'd love to hear why. We're here to listen. We're here to grow. And if you believe stories like this matter, stories about dignity, truth, and rebuilding from silence, then please subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss the next one, because more voices are coming and they deserve to be heard.